Welcome to this episode of Inclusive Urban Futures. Today, I have an absolute honor to welcome Eva Srnová, the diplomat at the permanent representation of the Czech Republic to the European Union in charge of cohesion policy and regional policy, urban matters, and just transition. Thank you very much for taking your time and being with us today. I thought that your background and story are inspiring, and I just wanted to give our audience the opportunity to learn from you and be inspired. So I just wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your mission, about your work.
Thank you a lot, Orna. Thank you for inviting me to this recording. And to this concept which you developed to give people some maybe hope for the future days that things will be normal again. As you already said, you introduced me very well. I work at the permanent representation of the Czech Republic to the European Union, which is, just to imagine, it's like an embassy of the Czech Republic to the European Union. Only that the European Union is not a state, so it's not called an embassy. So that's probably how to best explain the role of this institution. And the permanent representations are usually represented, or not usually, but represented in the Council, which is one of the three institutions of the EU. Besides the Commission, the European Parliament, also the Council. So, bluntly speaking, I'm the lengthy hand of my ministries back in Prague, sitting here in Brussels in Belgium. So that's very easily said and explained. As you said here, I'm working on the domain of regional policy, cohesion policy, which is sometimes mixed up. Regional policy being more national policy, while cohesion policy is the EU policy, which is again a bit abstract what it is. Well, cohesion policy, as you probably know, is a policy which should help the less developed regions to catch up, to converge with the more developed regions and the states within the European Union. And for this, the European Union has budget, quite extensive one, which is usually, well, not usually, but which is agreed upon in 7-year cycles. And in those 7-year cycles, the member states, together with the little help of the European Parliament, which approves the budget, decide on how much money the member states will contribute to the common European budget, of which then about 1/3 goes to cohesion policy. So if I speak in numbers, the overall expected budget for the next 7 years between 2021 and 2027 is about 2 trillion euro. And of that, about 373 billion euro goes to cohesion, which is quite a lot of money. And because the Czech Republic is eligible for quite a significant sum of this money, and because this money is still in the Czech Republic contributing to more than 40% of public capital investments, it is also quite a significant domain to be negotiated in the Council and agreed upon. Of course, the role of the permanent representations in the Council is to advocate for the national interests of the individual member states. So the role which we have here in permanent representation, and it's about 100 people who are here from the Czech Republic working on different domains, is to find the best compromise over the text, over the conditions, over the legislation which is being agreed in the Council, and then in trilogues and negotiations with the European Parliament and the Commission. So this is very roughly about what is my work. Maybe I might also add a few words about cohesion policy, what is actually covering and which funds it has. Cohesion policy contributes through different funds. It's the European Regional Development Fund, European Social Fund Plus, Cohesion Fund, and now we have one more fund which is not classified as Cohesion Fund. It is Just Transition Fund, but it is one of the funds which is put to the group of these funds which help to convergence between the regions. This Just Transition Fund is a new fund and came along with the new environmental priorities of the EU with the European Green Deal, and is dedicated especially to tackling social impact of transition of the regions which have to phase out of coal, peat, and shale oil. So this is quite a novelty which was introduced in 2018, and it is in support of the more or less industrial regions which are going through significant transformation due to their need to phase out of the old fossil fuel sources. So this came to the list of the domains which I have to work on currently. Maybe you might know that the Czech Republic has the fourth highest share on this fund in the EU, because we have 3 regions which are still phasing out of hard coal and lignite. So being quite an industrial country in the EU, it's quite an important fund for the Czech Republic. So this is in general. It's about money, it's about the conditions. The conditions are agreed at the very beginning of the multi-annual financial framework, which is between 21 and 27, as I already said. And the conditions are laid in regulations, and regulations are then, which are first proposed by the Commission, are then negotiated in the Council and in the Parliament, and together between the 3 institutions. They have already been concluded. We know the conditions for the years 21 to 27, and negotiating the best conditions for the Czech Republic was my task.
I just wanted to say, wow, that's incredible. I just wanted to ask you what inspired you to join this line of work? Because you said at the beginning it's abstract. It sounds quite complex and quite crucial in development of the EU and the Czech Republic. So, what inspired you to join this line of work?
I started my working professional career as an assistant to pre-accession advisor of an Irish origin. He was a very skilled and very good person, also in his character. He was supposed in the year 2000 to help the Czech Republic develop a program in support of small and medium enterprises at that time. It was 4 years before we acceded to the EU, and it was my actually first experience with the EU at that time. It was before as the Czech Republic entered the EU. So, and it started to interest me how the outside world, outside of the Czech Republic, tackles the regional development, tackles the economic development, and the development of the regions. And at the same time, of course, and maybe, well, we might be speaking about it later. But if I think about inclusion, for me, it's a lot about cohesion and about solidarity. And maybe also because of my background, because I come from one of those co-regions in the Czech Republic, in the north east of Czechia, on the border with Poland and Slovakia. And the region has quite a specific history given by its industrial development and also the mixture of people who are living in that region. There were the Poles, the Jews, the Germans, the Czechs, the Slovaks. And this probably formed me a little bit different than the rest of the Czechs. My grandfather was Polish. My maiden name is German. And I have a lot of friends who come from Poland. And this somehow forms you in maybe different understanding. We were also, as a family, a bit different in a way that I spent my childhood during the communism. My parents never allowed me to attend the Pioneer, which was the group of the young Communist Party. And we were also a strong evangelical and Protestant family. So at that time, it was like kind of having a stamp on your forehead that you do not belong to the society which accepts one ideology, and it probably forms you a little bit different towards the future. So. And I think that since then, I've been always feeling that inclusion is something which is very important. Also because my background is from a different social status than what I've reached today. I've moved in social mobility ranking, and this doesn't happen that often in the Czech Republic. It's quite the social mobility in Czech Republic is quite low, and I think it's probably the ability to see the life of the people in those regions, their needs, and the possibility to influence the policies on the top are something which started to interest me and started to be very appealing for my future career. So since then, I was working for the Irish pre-accession advisor. Then I worked for the Association of Cities and Towns in the Czech Republic. I finalized my studies in public policies in 2009. And then I moved on to this position. And I think what I like about this position is actually from the very highest level, I can help people on the ground because it's about cohesion approaches.
That is absolutely fascinating. I just wanted to ask you, from all these achievements, what is something that you're the most proud of? I mean, like for me, just listening to you, thinking that you influence now the negotiations to help your country and actually being a self-made woman, from what I understand. I mean, but that's just my impression from what you were sharing right now. I just wanted to ask you, what is something that you're the most proud of?
I guess it's my family, first of all. And the life that I can have here, it's something which is a gift, and I really like it. But from the professional point of view, it's difficult to pinpoint one thing because, of course, the diplomacy is about communication, being a good negotiator. It's about making the best advertising for your country, in spite of all you know about the country. and but I'm especially proud of certain things which I believe I've managed to contribute to, like helping our whole regions to take part in the initiative of the Commission, which resulted in creation of the Just Transition Fund. I think that I also contributed to some things which, from the perspective of global or European level, might seem too little because they have quite low budget. But I know that they can contribute quite a lot to the everyday life of people on the ground. It's for example, when we were discussing regulations on cross-border cooperation, there were some specificities, that we've had iron curtain on our border, and there are some specificities in the Czech-German border which were reflected in that regulation. For example, that the trust between the people has to be increased even today inside the EU on both sides of the border, on the Czech side and the German side. And that due to the historical events which happened to the Czech Republic and Germany, or then it was Czechoslovakia and Germany after the Second World War. So these are some of the achievements which are not so big in terms of value or money, but I think they are quite important for the everyday life of people on the ground.
Well, something that came to mind right now is how does your experience, you mentioned that basically you were there in the European affairs before the Czech Republic joined the European Union, and seeing your country transform. I'm just thinking about Prague and visiting Prague. I visited Prague, I think, in 2005, just months before the Czech Republic came into the European Union, and being a fellow Yugoslavian, and reading the names of the streets, it was still a part of our world and part of our, world. And I thought, what do you bring, like that perspective, that experience of seeing your country transform, join the union? What did you learn from it? How do you see inclusion differently, or maybe cohesion policy? What can we learn from that experience?
Well, I think that the Czech experience is in some ways, maybe from the perspective of cohesion policy, inspiring, because we have really moved a lot. We've been below the 75% average of the EU, and today we are slightly above 90%. So actually, if you are looking for a success story of cohesion policy, it's earlier it was Ireland, and today I believe I can say it's the Czech Republic. I don't want to boost too much, but if you look at the numbers, it's like that.
I think that Prague, from what I saw, it became a global city, isn't it? Like it's a global city now.
It's a global city, and I'm glad to say that it's not the only one in the Czech Republic anymore. We have Brno, we have Ostrava, which are regional cities closer to Slovakia, but both of them are very promising as regards innovation, research, and development. Ostrava is actually in the region where I come from, and what I admire about the city is the fact how they've managed to change their branding, because Ostrava used to be called a black city because of mining and because of miners who were there. And today it's a completely different story. They have a festival, Color of Ostrava, there which is held in the former factory, which was closed down in 1998 and transformed by enlightened developer together with the EU funds, actually, into a very nice technological business center, which provides a lot of services to anybody who's coming there. So, and on this story, I always explain that the change requires a lot of time, more than 20 years sometimes. And then you can start in 2001, and only in 20 years' time you can see the result, how things have changed. So it needs patience, it needs a lot of time, and that's why I appreciate that cohesion has at least 7 year cycle, because for any development changes, we would probably need more than 7 years. And it's then difficult because with the end of the 7 year cycles, we start with new conditions, new priorities, different stories. So sometimes when I look at cohesion policy and how important it is, I would be happier if the money were more able to swing from one period to another without such big changes, such as programs. We have to write new programs for each programming period, or change of conditions, and they change quite a lot. So this is one of the things which I'm trying to explain when people ask what is cohesion, what is regional policy. I try to explain: do not look for results in 1 year. That's a story which is the most important. You will not see the results in 1 year. You will see them probably in 10 or 15 years at the earliest. So, and I'm glad that I can say that we have not only Prague, we have other cities in the Czech Republic as well.
Right. Talking about changes, I mean, I'm sorry that I have to kind of bring to this one is like our COVID-19 2020-2021. So unfortunately, they have been the years now like no other. So I just wanted to ask you, how did the changes related to COVID-19 impact your line of work, your profession, the policy last year? Have there been some positive, some negative developments that you would like to highlight?
Well, COVID-19 in the world of cohesion is one of the episodes. We've had the episode of financial crisis, and we've had many other episodes. The thing, as I said, is that cohesion policy is a midterm policy. That means it's quite difficult for it to react swiftly and flexibly to what's happening right now over the period of 2 years. But, well, frankly speaking, I have to admit that the European Commission, which has the legislative power, managed to do certain changes in the legislation in a way to be more flexible, to use the money as much as possible. And I think that to the extent that the cohesion policy allows, we've managed to contribute with our bit to recovery and to resilience, as it is today fashion to say. So, and this needs to be, though, understood that any change on the ground takes time, and if we have these episodes coming in, we have to reshift our policy in certain aspects, but it's not possible to rewrite it completely, because then we would have to start drafting the new legislation, decide on new priorities, etc. Mm-hmm. And well, COVID-19, of course, it's a very difficult experience. I think that if I compare the EU to a patient, which is in a way a patient, we reacted in a panic sometimes, trying to save the state because everybody was panicking. So we closed the borders, leaving a lot of people without the opportunity to see their relatives. We were actually going against the basic rights of the people in the European Union. So I suppose the governments were a bit panicking, reacting in panic. We came back to some more calm resolution of the situation, but it took some time, of course. And if I look at what happened, and it was by accident, it happened actually in the year 2020, which is the year when we were also deciding on the 7-year budget. It's not that we, as the EU, decide on the 7-year budget every year. We do it in 7-year cycles. So we had COVID, and we were at the same time deciding at the 7 years budget. And we were deciding on the 7 years budget actually in July last year, which was 3 months or 4 months after COVID came. So the result of this planning and how we reacted was that we also decided that the EU would borrow some money. Not only we would live on the money which is contributed by the member states, depending on their GDP, but we decided that we also have to borrow something as a union. And my personal view, and I'm now not speaking on behalf of my country or on behalf of the union, my personal view is that maybe we reacted too much in panic, because we decided on borrowing money for the next generation EU based on a 3-month experience with COVID. And we will have to pay it until the year 2050. We will be obliged to pay this for a very long time, although we decided based on 3 months experience or 4 months. So this is one thing which I was a bit hesitant about when I heard about the decisions made at the political level. Of course, I understand that the situation is very difficult. The budgets are tight. The member states need money for resilience and recovery. But we are now only coming to decisions or to looking for the domains and priorities and what we are going to finance in the different member states through their recovery and resilience plans. And what are we financing? We're financing, again, very similar priorities as we have in cohesion policy, because you cannot really finance different things than we have in cohesion policy. This is this one pool of investments. You cannot really say this is cohesion and this is resilience and recovery. So this is a bit of danger. Maybe we opened a Pandora box. We don't know yet. We will see in the future. But we will have to deal with it. We will have to live with it. We will have to repay it back. And we have to spend the money in 3 years' time. By 2023, it has to be accounted for in 2026. So we have quite a short period of time for huge money, which is being borrowed on the markets outside globally by the EU, which will be sent to the economies. And my question is, what will happen if you send so much money into the economy within such a short period of time? Will we have enough services and goods to buy things actually with this money? Will it not lead to some spiral of inflation? This is what I don't know. I'm just asking because this is what comes to my mind. And I am afraid this might be the case because already today we see how certain goods, for example, in construction, are going up. So this is maybe something which is at least questionable. I'm not saying it's bad, it's only questionable whether we should not be a little bit more patient in making big decisions until we have the real knowledge of what's going on so that we can properly react. But I understand that the year 2020 was the year when we were deciding on the money, and we will not be doing so until 2027 again. So that was the only opportunity, either now or never. So maybe this was also one of the things which was very important in this highly political decision made in the European Council in July last
year. Well, could we actually consider that we, somehow we were lucky in Europe that somehow this is how I see it, that we were in fact lucky that decision was being made with this experience. Even though I completely agree with you, I think on your point of pumping resources quickly, because thinking about only like institutional response and trickle down from the EU to national to city neighborhood levels, that takes time in itself. And if the governance is not prepared or trained for this kind of channeling, as you said, that might be a problem because they will just not be prepared to spend it sometimes.
That's true. One more thing, this new instrument which the EU is going to borrow for is, I would say, territorially blind. It is not really expected that this instrument should, or maybe at the national level, when the member state is able to recognize that certain reforms are needed in certain areas which touch upon territorial issues, then it is covered. For example, in the Czech Republic, it's the issue of digitalization of spatial planning, for example, which I expect is very, very positive. But if it comes down to the individual territories, such as urban spaces, they had very little chance to really influence what's going on. First, because of the speed of the negotiations. That's obvious that we had to agree on everything very quickly, and everything had to be concluded very fast. Second, because of the nature, it is more a national plan than territorial, regional, or even urban. And third, the time which we had for this didn't really allow for specificities and going down to individual places. So that's why also I say that it's an instrument which might be interesting for the government, for the reforms, if they are able to do big reforms in such a short period of time. It might be less accessible for cities or regions because of its nature. So, but we will see. As I say, the positive thing is that the agreement we made quite quickly, which I think is positive in itself, because we've seen that the crisis taught us to find a compromise very quickly, in spite of our differences at the EU level. And we became maybe more flexible in priorities. With COVID crisis, we've opened up areas which had been closed for investments from the EU level. For example, tourism and culture, there were very little opportunities for financing from Cohesion Policy. But when the COVID crisis arrived, everybody realized how certain regions are dependent on these sectors. And if you cut out public investments into these areas, those regions may suffer incredibly. So this was something which reshuffled the priorities, opened up discussions which were long closed, maybe stirred the waters, because sometimes you need such crises to stir the waters of how we think or how we see things and how we react to them. And this I find quite positive. I think this is positive. It even opened up certain domains which were unnegotiable, such as co-financing, because for the COVID crisis, the Commission allowed for 100% financing, co-financing for the EU sources of the project. So, and this was not possible before. So I think these crises might help us think out of the box, look at the new realities with digital, with environmental, and how much they are now interconnected as well.
moving on to EU recovery plan, the Next Generation EU, seem to be reshaping the entire EU policy landscape, as you said, towards a digital, green, and inclusive recovery post-COVID-19. And cohesion policy, the key development policy of the Union, as you mentioned several times, takes, I believe, central stage in this historical opportunity to build back better, to benefit all citizens in all regions. So I was just wondering, can we delve a little bit more deeply into how the EU cohesion policy and Next Generation EU could support inclusive recovery in EU regions, according to your opinion, and maybe what are the issues that are still missing?
In cohesion policy, what I appreciate a lot maybe I will start a little bit out of the priorities and shift back to them. What I appreciate about cohesion policy is, in fact, the opportunity for the regions and the member states learn something by doing. Because cohesion policy is based on so-called shared management. That means that the Commission, together with the Parliament and Council, are setting the conditions for how to spend the money, but the actual implementation, spending the money, decision on what's going where, is on the member states. Although the EU sets the rules in quite tightly sometimes. For example, there are quite tight rules about how much should be invested from the European Regional Development Fund into the domains of research and development and environment. And this means these sectors are prioritized within this fund, especially in the transition regions and more developed regions. But even the less developed, they have to invest like 55% of the European Regional Development Fund into research, development, and environment, or climate-related issues. So, but in the end of the day, it's the member states. That means the ministries and the regions which cooperate. And this is, and maybe I will also come back to your question about what has cohesion brought to the Czech Republic. It is the opportunity to learn how to do strategy work, how to do strategy planning, and to implement it at the national, regional, and local level. And I think it is very significant in the Czech Republic, first because of the level of investments which comes to the Czech Republic from cohesion, but also because it is a condition from the Commission that without these strategies, the money will not flow. And before we entered the EU, we were very reluctant about any planning. Why? Because under the communist regime, we planned, and we planned everything. We planned our everyday lives, we planned our production of what will be produced, how it will be produced, who will produce it. We had full employment on this. So in 1990, when we gained our freedom, we thought that the best would be not to plan at all. Because, we were planning so heavily, we had been planning so heavily that we would probably prefer not to plan at all. And in 2000, when we started preparing to enter the EU, we were there again, and we should be able, and we were actually expected to start planning again. And I think it was very difficult clash with reality. What it actually means. We didn't understand it. We didn't understand that even in the free democratic world, the planning is normal. And and it was quite usual that some strategies were written, but because they were not accommodated with money, they were just put in the shelf and they were never used. Only with the EU, when we had suddenly such a huge amount of money, which was to be spent, but was to be spent cleverly, smart, we have to rethink our strategic planning. And I think it was one of the best added values of the cohesion policy, because we learned how to do the strategy work, how to do policy work. We accommodated it with money, and the money we could use for our territories. The problem in the Czech Republic is that the administrative division is quite big. We have local, regional, and national competencies, which are not interlinked. The state sends amounts of money for certain competencies to the local and regional authorities, and quite little is left for investments, unless the region or the municipality has specific economic activities from which they can invest. So cohesion policy brought the opportunity to invest, and the municipalities and regions had to learn how to make strategies for the development. I think that it is not appreciated enough, this learning by doing role of cohesion policy. I can imagine that we all look at results, outputs, how many projects would have been invested into, what we finance, whether we lost money or not by investing on the ground. But we have to understand that by investing and letting the people doing, we are giving them the rods and they can do the fishing themselves. So when the money is gone, they will continue in this practice because they've already learned how to use it. So this is one of the very good added values of cohesion policy, which is enormously important in the Czech Republic and has helped to convergence a lot.
And I mean, what I hear from you is, in a way, it's not only the resources, the money, it's also the method. And so what I hear from you is somehow as if cohesion policy is in fact unionizing policy of the European Union. It's like we share our resources, we share our experiences, we learn in the process. So are we correct to say that basically the fundamental, the underlying idea of the cohesion policy is the one that has the capacity to, in next years, contribute to inclusive recovery, or there are still things that have to be still worked on as we go?
I think it already contributes to inclusive recovery, especially because it invests into lagging behind regions, into regions which wouldn't be able to move in their economy higher if it wasn't for cohesion policy. So it is already contributing to it. I think what is the problem at the EU level is that it's not appreciated enough. Before the crisis started, cohesion policy was often labeled as a traditional, old-fashioned policy, which has little to...
But we in Europe are traditional and old-fashioned anyway.
Exactly.
That's who we are.
As you say, I have the same opinion, but it didn't really resonate as this, innovative new policy.
Groundbreaking, whatever.
Exactly. Something. Well, sometimes I have a feeling that we have to make up new things just for the sake of making them up, because everybody wants to make up something. So and make up something new. So we have to come up with something new, but we don't have to really. Frankly speaking, not always do we have to really make something new. Maybe we just need to alter the well-working policies, which may not seem so attractive, but if they're not attractive, then let's do the facelift, let's do the redesign. But they've proven quite well that they're doing the job. So,
or finish the job of implementation. Sometimes just finish the job.
Exactly. But that's the issue about cohesion policy is also that it is helping the, how to say it, if I compare it to social inclusion, the minorities, minority regions, those which are weaker, less developed, those which, like in social inclusion, are not vocal enough about their problems, about what they need. But and of course, the well-developed, they're able to advertise their needs, focus, for example, on research and development. But this needn't necessarily be the problem of the less developed. It can be, their problem might be, for example, even to keep their population there so that they do not leave. And I think this is something which the front runners often do not realize, that those who are lagging behind, they are lagging behind maybe because they lack people who would be able to run up to their pace. For example, I really like Ivan Karstek, if you know him. He's a politologist, Bulgarian politologist working in Vienna. And he's kind of he's opened up my eyes to certain issues which are happening in the EU, because he said, well, in some member states of the EU, they have suffered from up to 20% of decline in population. Those people, who are they? They're not seniors. They are people who are young, who are well educated, and who leave those countries. And then if you put these countries to this competition between who's better and who's worse, what sources do they have to compete with? They don't have the sources. They don't have the human sources, actually, which would bring them up. And this is what should be really stressed out, that the starting conditions of different member states and regions may be way different from what the other more developed regions and member states have in the EU. And if, for example, and he also mentioned one more thing, in those regions where they've lost 20% of their population, what are the people who are resting there afraid of? They're afraid of extinction. So in a way, they love the EU because it brought them freedom. But at the same time, they might have a controversial attitude towards the EU because they see that it also takes their youth. And then from there, the discontent is born. Discontent with what is threatening, the fear is born. And I think this is something which is very underestimated. Emotions around the trends which are happening in the EU, which are happening specifically in certain member states and certain regions. And the EU should accept that these specific trends need specific responses. That it may actually mean that those regions might be allowed actually to invest into basic services so that they are accessible for the population, for people who live there, which I think is very often questioned. Why are you financing such basic things like, I don't know, education or social services? So this is something which I think is a bit still missing in the EU policies, this territorial view of sectoral issues depending on where we implement the policies. And I think that if the EU started to reflect on these issues, understand them more, it could also react to discontent which is being born in certain member states, to issues which relate to rule of law, for example, which again I think have some background in the fear in those member states, fear that they are losing their identity, their population, their youth, and that they might extinct.
You mentioned a couple of things before, and I just thought that it was a good moment now to come back to ask you if you're thinking about inclusion as a concept. What does it mean to you, and how should it look like from your perspective?
Well, I already maybe mentioned that cohesion is a synonym for inclusion in my understanding. Solidarity as well. It's the acceptance that we have minorities in the EU, not only groups of people which can be defined as minorities, but also, for example, territories which can be actually characterized as minorities and which need specific help and whose needs to be better promoted. Inclusion is also about communication and advertising, because it often happens where you know that something is happening wrong. But if you don't know it, if the EU does not understand, doesn't know what's going on in certain parts of the EU, then it's not solved. So it has to be brought to the attention of the policymakers to be reflected in different policies.
And how do you think that that's the best done? I mean, we all know, I think that the common assumption about this is activist groups and stuff like that. But is there something more sophisticated that you think about? Something?
I think I think what works very well are examples, good practices. But the process of learning still is very much underestimated in this financial world of money. So it's a soft skill. It's something which you have to bring from people who are practitioners, who are at the same time able to explaining to this world of policymaking, which is quite abstract. So this interlinkage between practical implementation and the abstract creation of the policies is the biggest challenge, I think, for inclusion, for everything which needs more attention on the EU level. This I may maybe give an example again from my part, or from where I come from. I think that it is still quite little known in the west of EU about the Eastern EU countries. And but if you look at who is actually shaping those policies in the Commission, preparing the conditions and everything, it's usually or the representation of the Eastern countries is quite low in those teams. And I think this is something which should be improved in order to interconnect these two worlds.
So you're basically saying that diversity in the teams themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, diversity in the teams may contribute to better policy making. Second thing, which I think is quite important, is, and it's my personal opinion, I haven't done any study or analysis on this, but it struck me that actually the Westerners, if I may say so, actually know very little Slavic languages. And
that's true.
That's true, but the language is the gate to your culture. If you don't know the language, you probably don't understand the culture, because language is thinking, is the way you think. And this surprised me when I heard one Belgian who lives actually in Ostrava in the Czech Republic, when he was so surprised when he said, well, I started learning Czech, and by learning Czech, I realized how many other Slavic languages opened up to me. And this was like, yes, if you learn Czech, you will probably understand 20% of Polish and almost 100% of Slovak. You will understand some Croatian, Slovenian. You will simply open up.
I didn't need to learn Czech coming to Czech Republic. I knew how to order my zemička straight away.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you don't like you kind of know, like you actually can read the names of the streets. We understand quite a lot.
Yeah, exactly. And I made just a very quick funny check in how many less developed regions speak a Germanic language, which is the language in which we negotiate. And guess how many? 0.
Oh,
0. There are some regions which have Romanic languages as a basis. Romania, there are some autonomous regions of France, etc. Italy, for example, Spain, but none of the regions which are classified as less developed regions speak a Germanic language.
You mean Germanic, but you mean German and
English.
English, right?
Yeah, yeah, German and English. So that's what we have to maybe tackle as well. We maybe should be motivating, explaining to the West that it's worth learning our languages, learning and understanding who we are, why we react as we do. Why, for example, we have much more fear in the society than it is usual in the West, which then forms how we react to certain policy proposals. And that's one of my understanding, that this is very much underestimated, not understood, because the West probably didn't have this fear or didn't live this fear which we have been through under the communism.
Which is primarily USSR, isn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. And which, for example, means that we are much more negative than it would be expected based on our economic outputs. I was actually looking into Eurobarometer, and I was laughing because although our Czech unemployment rate is still, I think, second or maybe maximum third lowest in the EU, we are very skeptic about the developments of our economy for the future. We do not believe that things will get better, only in 2023 maybe. So, and this does not correlate with what's happening in the EU in average. So
that sounds French, though.
I didn't look at the
French. I would say that if you look at France, that would be more or less that kind of opinion. It's going well. Let's take that with a grain of salt. And I think that that's the other reason, actually, we should speak each other's languages, because we could find parallels. We could find parallels between each other. Because, I mean, actually, you were saying the West doesn't speak the Eastern languages, but East is trained to speak Western languages, especially German by tradition in many regions, French by tradition of all diplomacy, English by globalization. So you are speaking one of these three or all the three. And if you were born early enough, you also speak Russian.
Exactly.
Which puts you in a phenomenal negotiation position in this interconnected world, because you can communicate on the entire Eurasia, right?
Well, if you're clever enough and smart enough to take advantage of all these three, that's the best.
Not only order a good bread.
Yeah, exactly. But well, as I say, why I'm saying it, as you said, for me, learning English or French means that I started to understand the Western culture of living, of understanding things, respecting things, of thinking. And when I try to explain certain issues to my colleagues from the Western countries, it is extremely difficult because it's like coming from a different world, from a different planet. It's like, I will touch upon a very controversial issue, for example, in migration. When migration quotas came up on the table, it was narrowed down only to the discussion that we refused to open up the door to migrants and help them. It's not true, in fact, because we have quite a number of migrants from the east of Europe, which are coming to the Czech Republic on an everyday basis. We live with them, with Russians, with Ukrainians, etc. The problem was, and I am going back to the issue of fear. And I think, and again, I will come back to Ivan Karstev, who first named it. The problem is that the West, starting being multicultural after the Second World War, because they needed people to work, so they brought them in. They invited migrants to work in the West to develop their economy after the Second World War. We had been extremely multicultural until the Second World War. When I looked up the numbers, and I am not sure if I remember them very well, but during the time of Czechoslovakia between 1918 and 1939, we had 3 million of Germans in our territory. We have 2 million of Slovaks and 3 million of Hungarians. And we made the experience that it didn't pay off, or it didn't work well with our Czechs on that territory. And we, if I may say bluntly, virtually got rid of all of them because we, I'm sorry, I don't know the word in English. We relocated Germans from the German borderlands along the German border because of their attitude towards the Germany during the Second World War, towards the Nazi party at that time, and it didn't work well with the Czechs. We had fights with the Polish in my region where I come from over the territory of and I mean fights like real fights. It wasn't fun. It was like shooting and people dying. And that's what formed us for the period of clear homogeneity during the communism, when we didn't have migrants or anybody except for Russians being on our territory, which were enemies again. So, in a way,
the guys planning the economy.
exactly. And this was actually something which formed our, underconscious fear of people who are different than us. And when we were imposed the quotas, it was like imposing on us something which we never tackled ourselves inside culturally. We never touched upon it. We never opened up this issue. And it came up from outside. So this was a very painful moment when I realized that first, we haven't settled our problem, which we had since the Second World War. And second, we made a mistake that we had to tackle it publicly in the room. So it didn't even help us to come through it and to heal ourselves in a way. So that's something which I think is not understood by the Western. They often viewed us as selfish, not solidary, etc.
What I hear from this, and what comes to mind for me, is if there was a chance to actually exchange stories of integration, because I mean, integration, accepting of migrants is not an easy going story anywhere. So if we could just have the opportunity to exchange, experience and opinions, because here I think that we are talking about so many layers of possible inclusion. First of all, our own territorial inclusion within our own countries, then a territorial inclusion of the EU and EU member states, right? And then we are speaking about east and west of the EU, and then we have a foreign population come in. This is many, many layers of complexity to be tackled when we're talking about, or when I think when the word or the concept inclusion is pronounced, I think that there's there's a lack of understanding how complex this is and how important, actually, if not for more, let's say, but it will be great for much more, but to exchange these experiences, because I believe that there are, like, other countries, went through other stories, and if we could, as Europeans, just exchange this, of these, like, what is it that we've been through, and then when we understood, we exchange our stories, then we can move a step forward, thinking, well, what do we do by, okay, what is policy defined third country migrants, right? So this is the next step, I would think. I mean, this is what I understand from your discourse.
You are very right. I think as you say, it's about stories, and stories are about emotions. So we should be sharing our emotions. We are sharing so much our brain, money, numbers, but we are not sharing enough stories about what has happened in our countries, why we are afraid, for example. What's the cause of this fear? I will tell you one story which actually came from the region where I come from. There is a writer who wrote. Her name is Karin Leginska. She wrote a book which is called A Leaning Church. It's a story starting at the end of the 19th century of the region where I come from. And when she was, and it is a very touching story, because it's a story. The story explains the complexity first of the industrial background of the region on individual families, which have different nationalities. Some of them are Czech or claim to be Czech. Some of them are Slavic, some of them are Polish, some of them are German, Jewish, and they're mixed up. The families are mixed up. They live together on one place. Then the war comes, and the war shuffles the families in a way you would never expect, because suddenly they have to claim who they are. Who are you? Are you a Czech? Are you a Polish? And
how can you be half? How can you be mixed? How can you be four?
Exactly. How can you be, for example, Silesian? Because those people in those regions claim themselves to be Silesian, but nothing like a Silesian nationality existed at that time.
Yeah, I have no idea what that is.
Well, there is quite a big Silesian region in Poland with 5 million people. So it's not. It's quite a big region, and part of it is also on the Czech side. So, but it comes back from Prussia. So it's a really very complex story. But what I'm saying is that they never thought of themselves as being Polish, being Czech, being Slovak, until there was a national state which came and said, you have to decide who you are. And those people didn't want to decide who they are. They were happy as they were. And when they started deciding who they were, they became enemies, because they stood on different sides of of the history, let's say. So, and coming back to this book, it was like a eye-opening for the people living there, why certain things happen to them or how they think. And before, and she was, and when she was explaining the book on TV, she said, well, I've been listening to a lot of stories, and the book is based actually on those stories. They are not exact stories of those people; they are made up, but they are inspired by the stories of those people who lived them, or their grandparents, great-grandparents lived them. And when she was doing research for these stories, she was advised not to write the book, not at all, because it was touching very sensitive issues. And the people living there were afraid of this book. They were afraid that what they would read might hurt them, open up the old wounds which they had. And when she issued the book, it has 3 parts. She has already issued 2 of them. People read the books and they said, we're so glad that we opened up those stories and we started to explain them. And these are exactly the stories which should be read across the EU. Those stories should be translated from Czech to other languages, and they should be read across the EU so that we can start understanding each other. That's something which really is very important. Telling the stories of why we make the decisions that we make.
But for me, I see something else. I think that you're absolutely right. That it's very important to write these stories because they're relevant to the Czech Republic, but they're relevant to so many other regions, former Yugoslavia. This is the story of my city being in 9 countries.
Yeah.
And
well,
yes. Yeah. We keep the city, and we let everybody, give the name that they would like. So we ended up with 200 names for one city. Everybody can call it in their own, we don't discriminate. Everybody can call it in their own name, as long as they can find it on the map, But we intermarry at will. Whoever stays, is not bored from the flatland. But jokes aside, I think it is important to sometimes these feelings. I think that being a part of the nation state is very clear that it has its own discourse. It has its own concept. Being out of the member states is being almost naked. It's being out. It's being foreigner. It's being a permanent guest. That is the only so. That is quite a negative concept, and I think that this kind of a book that you describe, I think that they help people understand what they've been through, and that their pain is not their private pain or something to be ashamed of. Is that maybe there are about 6 or 7 countries in this case that went through exactly that. That there are communities that had to nitpick, then split hairs of what kind of nationalities are there. And I think that it is also the opportunity there for the union. Because if I can say to people, I am bit Polish, bit Italian, bit Austrian, bit Hungarian, bit Serbian, bit Croatian, I might be a very good representative of the European. Maybe I'm the European then. Maybe the person who is 3 nations in that region is the perfect European because he can speak Polish and Czech and Slovak because his family already did uniting and integration. And maybe they have been through a bad luck of having to declare how many percentages of what are there. But I think that underpinning all that is actually the decision on the family level to unite much earlier than the idea of the EU was there. And I think that we don't bank on this. I think that the missing out of exchange of these experiences is actually not banking on these international, inter-member state stories, because fundamentally there is disappointment and pain, and you know, I absolutely know that, you know, from Yugoslavia and all the stories that have been very public, but fundamentally it's about a union, and it's fundamentally about a union falling apart. And I think that that is another learning of appreciating how is it that one region can be part of several countries. You spoke about the Polish, the Slovak, the Czech, the German being together in one region. It is being, in effect, you know, shaped by several nations, and that is, I think, richness and wealth. So I think that we have to appreciate the power of our international experiences on regional and family level, but also really very much fundamentally understand the power of a union, and a power and a pain a demolition of a union causes. Because, I mean, these people were in one region because they were part of one country and the second country and stuff like that. Austria as well, there was an Austro-Hungarian Empire. You know, we still have memories and sentiments of how great Austria was when we were part of it. So there is a power to the union, and that power unites families. And if we let it drift, it doesn't only makes a divorce between countries, it's fundamentally hurting the families, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think you summarized it very well and very cleverly. I also think that what's important to say is that in families we look after each other, not even counting the costs, I would say.
Yes.
And that's what we should be learning at the union level as well. Because very often it's said that you know, the wealthy pay for the poor ones. Well, the poor ones contribute in other ways. They probably buy the goods of the companies which come there from the West. So well, the business is two-sided. It's not only one side. So I think this is often forgotten, and the relationship is often put only in the monetary terms. But it's not only about money. It's about the understanding, as you said, that not being in union is painful and cost us a lot, much more than we would like to ever experience again. So I would like to stress this, because we often forget about these roots of the EU, why it was actually established, what was the reason.
Would you like to say something more? Did we miss anything about, you know, cohesion policy? Would you like to add something? There was something that I didn't give you the opportunity to say from all this question that I sent you.
Yeah, well, maybe what I would like to mention, one more thing is that and this was probably something which COVID crisis brought, but not only COVID crisis. I think it was also the result of the different votes across the EU, when we started to realize that certain extremist parties come to power in some member states, or there might be some populist results of the votes which we wouldn't really like to have in the EU. And it seems to me, and I hope I'm not mistaken, that the Commission started to promote more the place-based approach to EU policies, not only in cohesion policy, but mainly in sectoral policies, that they started to understand that places matter. And if they don't matter, then discontent is born, and people start to react in certain ways because they're forgotten, or because they have a feeling that they don't have any future. So I can see it in regional policy. I hope it will be more developed. I can see it, for example, in this Just Transition Fund, which was formed for the purpose of helping the coal regions to phase out of coal. And it's a quite specific fund, which is not dedicated to energy transition, but it is first and foremost dedicated to helping the employees, the people who are in the industries, to cope with the changes, to change to new developing technologies, to find new emerging energy technologies and work in those areas and domains. I think that the Commission is also trying better to understand what divides us and why. It is, for example, in the more focus on urban-rural divide, which is by Carstef bigger problem actually than the divide between the East and West. That we from the cities start not to understand those living in rural areas. And those in rural areas feel cut off from the technology and the benefits which the new future is bringing. So that's something which I think should be also reflected upon, that we have this divide. We have also this industrial versus non-industrial countries divide across the EU, which I think is the EU or the Commission is trying to better reflect. As I said, we can see it also in how much money is specifically earmarked for urban development. This earmarking started in the period 2014 and 2020. And in ERDF today, we've agreed during the negotiations that 8% of the European Regional Development Fund will be dedicated to sustainable urban development. So this is something which is very positive. In the Czech Republic, we have already been doing so because it showed that if we use the sustainable urban development strategies, the money is invested more efficiently, and the cities are forced actually to prepare complex strategies covering various issues and going beyond their administrative borders. I think this is the most important thing, that even the functional urban areas are covered by this money. So these are the positive aspects of the future cohesion, not only cohesion, maybe EU policies in general. And for the future, we might be more ambitious and prepare more tailor-made funds for the specific needs of certain either areas or sectors or regions which suffer from changes in certain sectors. I think that's very relevant for the environmental changes which we are facing now, for the climate changes which we have to tackle, and which have different impact on different regions across the EU. This must be said.
Very much for this. I think that I would like to move to the last question, and that is, if you would like to communicate one important message to the audience of Inclusive Urban Futures, what would it be?
I would probably advocate or ask that in policy making, it would be great if we thought about things such as trust among people and the institutions. Because building trust actually pays off. If people trust each other, they are somehow able to cope with the EU policies, invest the money properly, because they believe that they have the added value, because they believe in the future of their region, they trust each other. If the trust is missing, I think that's the core of big issues across the EU. It's if trust is missing at the very highest level, then we do not believe that the member states or the regions are able to properly spend the money, we tend to follow each penny in the process, which is counterproductive, which actually discourages people to really do brave things, to think out of the box. Because if you are so strictly followed and if you comply with the written rules, then you do not tend to try new things, experiment, or think out of the box, because then you make mistakes, of course. We should also encourage people not to be afraid of making mistakes. If they are not intentional, if they are not fraud, they should be able to make them without being punished. I think that's quite an important lesson, which I learned from being a mother. My kids, they have learned so much by making mistakes. And in fact, if they didn't make the mistakes, they would never learn what they know now. So I think we should bear this in mind and be able to let people make mistakes. I'm, of course, speaking about unintentional mistakes, which are not done with the purpose of fraud or anything like that. But mistakes which happen, either administrative or others, they should be somehow, to a certain extent, tolerated and taken as something which comes along the process of learning.
I think that that's an excellent concluding point. I would just like to say thank you so much for your time. That was really generous. So thank you so much. And I hope that everyone will learn from what you shared with us and the ideas discussed.
Thank you, Orna, and thank you for this opportunity. It was actually you who decided to include me in your project. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
You were listening to the podcast Inclusive Urban Futures with Orna Rosenfeld. Please stay tuned for the next episode.